The people who anger you the easiest are the people who control you the most, and they don't even have to try. Think about that. A stranger says 6 words to you in traffic, and for the next hour your jaw is tight. Your coffee tastes like nothing. You're rehearsing comebacks to a person you'll never see again. 6 words. That's all it took. You gave a total stranger free rein in your mind, and he didn't even ask for it. Most people call this being human. I call it being unarmed. Here's the story. Most of us were sold, usually by well-meaning people who were themselves being run by their own nervous systems. If someone disrespects you and you don't react, you're weak. Silence is surrender. A real man, a real woman, a real someone stands up for themselves, matches energy, gets loud when the room gets loud. It sounds like strength. It is the opposite of strength, because reacting isn't a decision. Reacting is a reflex, and a reflex by definition is something that happens to you, not something you choose. The moment someone can predict your reaction, the moment they know exactly which sentence will make your face go red, they own a lever inside you. They can pull it whenever they like. For free, forever. The strong don't refuse to feel anger. They refuse to let anger drive. The moment you react, you hand over the wheel. Say that one back to yourself the next time your blood starts to climb. The moment you react, you hand over the wheel. Whoever provoked you is now driving your face, your voice, your next 12 hours. You didn't lose the argument. You lost custody of yourself. To understand why this hook is so easy to set and so hard to resist, you have to go back further than childhood. You have to go back about 200,000 years. Anger is not a personality flaw, it's hardware. It's a survival system built for a world where the threat in front of you was a spear, a rival tribe, a predator in the grass, a world where the correct response to a threat was immediate and physical fight or be eaten. Your nervous system doesn't know the difference between a lion and a rude email. It reads threat, floods you with cortisol and adrenaline, narrows your vision, quickens your pulse, and prepares you to hit something. That machinery is still fully installed. It just has nothing appropriate left to point it at, because almost none of your modern provocations are actually lethal. Your boss undermining you in a meeting will not kill you, but your body responds as if it might. There's a second layer underneath the biology, and it's older than the individual. It's tribal. For most of human history, status inside the group was survival. To be humiliated in front of the tribe wasn't just embarrassing. It was dangerous. Status determined who ate first, who mated, who got protected when the group split into factions. So your brain still treats a public insult as a status attack, and a status attack to primal wiring is existential. That's why a comment about your work can feel, for one irrational second, like a threat to your life. It isn't. But 400,000 years of ancestors who survived by taking status threats seriously didn't leave you the option of shrugging it off by default. You have to override the default on purpose every time. And here is the part almost nobody tells you. The people who provoke you know this, even if they couldn't explain the biology. They've simply learned through trial and error which buttons produce which results. A skilled provocateur is not smarter than you. He is more patient. He is running a low-cost experiment on your nervous system, and every time you flinch, he writes down the result. There was a regional sales director, call him Voss, who ran quarterly numbers for a mid-sized firm, competent, well-liked by his team, and completely unprepared for the man they promoted above him, a corporate transplant named Reyes, brought in to tighten performance. Reyes never raised his voice. That was the whole method. In the first team meeting, he interrupted Voss mid-sentence, glanced at his phone and said, "Sorry, go on, I got most of that." Voss felt the heat rise in his neck immediately. He pushed through the rest of his presentation flustered, talking faster than he meant to, losing the thread twice. Reyes did it again the following week, and the week after, small interruptions. A raised eyebrow at a projected number. A "we'll circle back" that never circled back. Nothing you could file a complaint about. Nothing that would sound like anything retold to HR. But Voss started dreading Tuesdays. He started over-preparing, then under-preparing out of exhaustion, then snapping at his own team over nothing, passing the pressure downstream the way pressure always travels, down, to whoever has the least power to push back. It took Voss 4 months to notice the pattern. Instead of just living inside it, Reyes wasn't testing his competence. He was testing his composure. And every time Voss's composure cracked, even slightly, Reyes recorded a win. A small, silent piece of leverage banked for later. For the day promotions were decided and someone needed to say quietly in a closed room, "I just don't know if he handles pressure well." The turn came in a meeting where Reyes tried the move a 5th time. interrupting, dismissive, checking his phone. Voss paused. Let the silence sit for 2 full seconds, which in a conference room feels like 20. Then he said, evenly, without heat, I'll finish the point, then you can respond to it. And kept talking, same volume, same pace. No performance of calm, actual calm, because he'd finally understood what game was being played. Reyes never tried it again, not because he'd been shamed, because the experiment had stopped producing data. There was nothing left to learn from provoking a man who no longer flinched. So here is what you do, starting with the next person who tries this on you. Stop answering provocation with emotion. Answer it with time. When you feel the heat rise, and you will feel it every time, that part never fully goes away. Do not speak. Not because silence is a power move to perform at them. Because silence gives your prefrontal cortex, the slow, rational, adult part of your brain, 3 or 4 seconds to catch up to your amygdala, which reacts in milliseconds and thinks in nothing but threat and fight. 3 seconds is enough. It is almost always enough. Stop trying to win the exchange. Winning the exchange is the trap. The person needling you doesn't actually want your best argument. They want your worst reaction, because your worst reaction is what proves their theory of you. Deny them the data. Give them nothing to write down, and stop treating every provocation as if it deserves your full attention. Attention is not free. Attention is the most valuable thing you own, because it is the one resource you cannot make more of. You can make more money, you cannot make more hours. When you give a stranger's insult 20 minutes of your evening, you have paid him 20 minutes of your only non-renewable resource, and he didn't even have to ask. There's a second trap sitting right behind the first one, and it's more dangerous because it looks like wisdom instead of weakness. It's the belief that ignoring someone entirely, going cold, going silent, giving nothing is itself a kind of loss. That withdrawing means they got to you. That the mature, secure response is to stay engaged, to prove calmly that you're unbothered. This is half right and half a trap. Because there's a difference between composure and engagement. You can be perfectly calm and still be handing someone your attention, hour after hour, which is exactly what they wanted in the first place. Not your anger, specifically, but your involvement. Some people don't need to make you furious. They only need to make you interested. Furious is just the fastest route there. Attention is currency. Stop paying it to those who insult you. This one runs on a different wire than pure anger. It runs on status signaling, and status signaling is a game everyone is playing whether they admit it or not. In any group of animals with a social hierarchy, status is communicated constantly through posture, through who looks away first, through who gets interrupted and who doesn't get interrupted. Humans do the identical thing with words instead of postures. When someone insults you and you respond, any response, defensive or aggressive, it doesn't matter which, you have signaled that their opinion of you carries weight. You've confirmed publicly that this person's assessment matters enough to argue with. That confirmation is the status transfer. It happened the second you opened your mouth to defend yourself, regardless of how the argument itself turned out. The people who understand this instinctively are the ones you notice never seem to defend themselves against small attacks. It isn't because nothing lands. It's because they understand that defending yourself against a low status accusation grants it status by treating it as worth defending against. A man accused of something absurd doesn't dignify the absurd accusation with a rebuttal. The absurdity itself is the rebuttal, and adding words on top of it only suggests subtly that there might be something worth denying. There was a woman, call her Lindqvist, a partner at a mid-sized architecture firm, who had a junior colleague, younger, sharper-tongued, clearly hungry for her role. In meetings, the junior colleague developed a habit like jabs disguised as jokes. Guess that's the old-school approach? Dropped after Lindqvist proposed a design. Laughter from the newer hires, the kind of laughter that isn't really about the joke. It's about testing which way the room will lean. For the first few weeks, Lindqvist did what almost anyone does. She engaged, gently corrected the record, explained why old school was actually load-bearing experience. Every correction, though, kept the joke alive one round longer, kept the room's attention on the question of whether Lindqvist was in fact past her prime. She was winning each individual exchange and losing the larger war, because the war wasn't about facts. It was about who the room believed was worth listening to by default. She changed nothing about her tone. She changed what she gave attention to. The next jab landed in a meeting, and Lindqvist simply continued speaking about the design as though nothing had been said. No pause, No glance, not even the small flicker of the eyes that says, "I heard that," and I'm choosing not to respond because even that flicker is a form of payment. She just kept walking through her point at the same pace as if the joke had made no sound at all. Within a month, the jabs stopped, not because the junior colleague had a change of heart, because a joke that gets no reaction twice stops being told. It isn't funny anymore. It never lands. Ask yourself, before you respond to anything, one blunt question: is this person's opinion of me actually a resource I need? Not do their words sting. They might sting regardless. That's the old machinery again. You don't fully control that part. The question is whether this specific person's judgment carries any real weight over your actual life, your income, your safety, your children, your future. If the honest answer is no, then you are not being asked to respond, you are being asked to spend, and you are allowed to decline the purchase. Stop confusing engagement with strength. Silence, delivered without heat and without performance, is not passive. It's the most expensive thing you can withhold from someone who's begging, whether they know it or not, for your attention. But there is a third layer under both of these, and it's the one people avoid the longest, because it requires looking at yourself instead of at your provoker. It's the belief that what makes you angry is arbitrary, that anyone would be bothered by that insult, that accusation, so there's nothing to learn from your own reaction pattern. That's false, and it's worth sitting with why. What angers you names your wound. Not every provocation produces the same charge in you. Someone can call you a bad driver and you'll laugh. Someone can call you selfish and something in your chest will drop an inch. The difference isn't the insult's objective severity. It's whether the insult touches a place you're already unsure about yourself. This is basic psychological defense mechanics. A lie told about you produces almost no charge because there's nothing in you for it to attach to. A truth you've buried, though? A fear you haven't resolved about your own worth? Your own competence, your own lovability, that produces enormous charge because the outside accusation is confirming an internal verdict you were already secretly afraid of. The anger you feel in that moment isn't really about the other person at all. It's the sound of an old wound being touched by a stranger's finger. The rage is loud precisely because the wound underneath is old and never fully closed. This is why the most composed people you'll ever meet aren't people with fewer flaws. They're people who've gone looking for their own weak points on purpose, in private, long before anyone else found them by accident in public. You cannot be blackmailed with a secret you've already told yourself out loud in the mirror. Picture a family dinner. Two brothers, mid-30s, the kind of low, simmer competition that never got named out growing up and so never got resolved. The older one made partner at a firm. The younger one left a stable job 2 years ago to start something of his own, and it hasn't taken off the way he hoped. Somewhere around dessert, the older brother says, lightly, the way people say the cruelest things as a joke so they can deny the cruelty if called on. It's still doing the whole startup thing. Just that. No follow-up. The younger brother's face goes hot in under a second. He hears himself say something sharp, something about the older brother's marriage, something he'll regret within the hour. Something with nothing to do with startups at all. The table goes quiet. His mother changes the subject with the practiced speed of someone who's done it before. Here's what actually happened underneath that exchange. The older brother's comment landed so hard not because it was devastating. It was 4 words. But because the younger brother had been quietly asking himself the exact same question every night for 6 months. Am I actually failing at this? The brother didn't wound him. The brother simply said out loud, carelessly, the thing the younger brother had already been whispering to himself in the dark, and the collision between the private fear and the public accusation is what produced the blast. Had the younger brother already made peace with the honest answer, maybe it doesn't work out and I'll be all right either way. The same 4 words would have landed as nothing. A shrug, maybe even a laugh, and a real one. So do the uncomfortable work in private that most people only ever do in public mid-argument badly. Go looking for the 2 or 3 things people could say about you that would genuinely detonate something. Not the silly ones, the real ones. Sit with them. Ask honestly whether they're true, partly true, or simply old fears wearing the costume of truth. Do this on a quiet evening, alone, with nobody watching and no ego to defend. Because the goal isn't performance, it's disarmament. Every fear you examine like this, deliberately in advance, is a lever someone else can no longer use on you later. In front of an audience at the worst possible moment, there's an exception people carve out for themselves, and it sounds almost noble with strangers. Sure, composure. But with the people I love, my partner, my kids, my family, holding back would be fake. They deserve the real me. Anger is honesty. It's a comforting story. It's also how people burn down the exact relationships they claim to be protecting. The closer someone is to you, the more your anger costs you. With a stranger, anger is a status transaction. You lose a small amount of leverage and the account resets tomorrow because you'll likely never see him again. With someone you love, you're not spending from a stranger's account. You're spending from a shared one built over years, and every overdraft is remembered by both parties, whether either says so out loud. The deeper mechanism here isn't status, it's attachment, a far older and more primal wire than ego, going back to infancy, when proximity to a caregiver wasn't a preference. It was the entire difference between living and not living. That circuitry never fully retires. It just changes targets. A parent, a partner, a child. So when someone you're attached to disappoints you, ignores you, forgets you, the nervous system doesn't file it as a minor irritation. It files it as a threat to the bond itself, and answers with the same fight response built for a physical predator, aimed now at someone whose loyalty you actually need. You end up attacking the very security you're afraid of losing, which is how people who are terrified of being abandoned behave, in exactly the way that eventually gets them abandoned. There was a father, call him Kessler, with a 17-year-old son who was, by every reasonable measure, a good kid, solid grades, no real trouble, just increasingly somewhere else. Headphones in, answers getting shorter. One evening the son forgot to mention a change in his pickup time and Kessler stood in an empty parking lot for 40 minutes before his son texted casually that he'd caught a ride with a friend instead. Kessler was not angry about 40 minutes. He told himself he was. What actually happened when his son walked in the door that night was an explosion completely out of proportion to a missed text. Voice raised, old grievances dragged in, the son's face going flat and closed in the particular way teenagers learn early, the face that says I am now waiting for this to be over rather than actually listening. It took Kessler 2 days and his own wife asking him flatly what he was really so afraid of to admit the true shape of it. His son didn't need him the way he used to. The forgotten pickup wasn't the wound. It was proof of a wound already forming. A son quietly becoming independent, a father quietly becoming less central to his son's daily life. And Kessler had responded to that fear the only way the old wiring knows how to respond to a threatened bond, by escalating loudly in a way that guaranteed the exact distance he was afraid of. The turn came the next time it almost happened again. A canceled plan, a short answer. Kessler felt the same heat rise, recognized it this time for what it was, and instead of raising his voice, said only, I miss when we used to talk more. That's all this is really about for me. His son, startled by the honesty, actually put his phone down. So when anger rises toward someone you love, don't ask what they did wrong. Ask what you're afraid of losing. Almost every disproportionate reaction to a small offense from someone close to you is a large unspoken fear wearing a small, convenient complaint as a disguise. Fear of irrelevance, fear of not being chosen, fear of being replaced by someone or something else in their attention. Name the fear to yourself silently before you open your mouth. Then decide whether the person in front of you is actually the threat or just the nearest available target for something older and sadder than a missed text. Punish the behavior if it needs correcting. Do not punish the person for frightening you. People treat composure like eye color, a trait you were either issued at birth or weren't. Some people are just naturally calm. I'm not built that way. It's a convenient belief because it removes the obligation to try. It is also false, and probably so. Composure is a rehearsed skill, not a personality. Here's the physiological detail almost nobody tells you because it's unglamorous compared to the mythology of the naturally calm person. The chemical surge behind anger, the cortisol and adrenaline flooding your system the instant you feel threatened, has a shelf life. Left alone, unfazed by further angry thought, that surge begins dissolving within roughly 90 seconds. What extends it sometimes for hours isn't the original provocation. It's the story you keep telling yourself about the provocation on a loop, each replay dumping a fresh dose of the same chemicals back into your system. The insult happens once, The re-injury happens 50 times, self-administered. This means the entire skill of composure comes down to one narrow, learnable window the first few seconds after the trigger, before the story loop has a chance to start. Interrupt that window consistently enough in enough small, low-stakes moments, and you build something like a callus over the reflex. Not because you stop feeling the surge, you never stop feeling it, but because the pathway between feeling it and acting on it gets a fraction slower and a fraction more supervised every time you practice the interruption. It is mechanically no different from training any other reflex. Nobody is born able to catch a thrown knife by the handle instead of the blade. It's drilled badly at first until it isn't. There was a negotiator, call her Pharaoh, who spent years talking through barricaded doors and stairwells, the kind of work where the wrong tone of voice at the wrong second has consequences nobody in an office ever has to consider. She had a habit almost nobody noticed on the job. Before responding to anything hostile said to her, she pressed her thumbnail briefly hard into the pad of her index finger. A half second of sharp, deliberate physical sensation, chosen on purpose because it was boring, unremarkable, impossible to see from 3 feet away, and just uncomfortable enough to break the story loop before it started. She hadn't invented this under pressure. She'd built it years earlier in situations with nothing at stake at all. A difficult relative, a slow line at a counter, arguments over nothing, deliberately using the small stuff as a training ground for the big stuff. The same way you don't discover you can run 5 miles on the day of the race. By the time she was talking someone down from a genuinely dangerous decision, the half-second pause wasn't a performance of calm. It was a groove worn so deep into her that reaching for it under real pressure required no more conscious effort than reaching for a door handle in a dark, familiar hallway. Build your own version of Pharaoh's half-second and build it now while nothing is at stake, not later when everything is. Pick a small, physical, boring interruption, a breath held for a fork count, a hand pressed flat against a table, a single word repeated silently. It doesn't matter what it is. What matters is that you install it during low-stakes irritations. The slow driver, the interrupted sentence, the minor slight, so it's already grooved into you by the time a real provocation arrives and your judgment is least available to invent one on the spot. Do not wait to feel calm before you practice this. You will never feel calm first. The pause comes before the calm, not after it every single time. For every person who has ever mastered this, without exception, I'll tell you plainly, this isn't a lecture from someone who was born calm. Nobody is. I spent years mistaking my own quick temper for passion, for standards, for caring more than everyone else in the room, which is the story angry people tell themselves so they don't have to look underneath the anger at what's actually there. It took losing something I valued, a working relationship I'd have said, right up until it ended, meant a great deal to me, to finally sit down and ask the plain question. What was I actually protecting? Every time I raised my voice over something small, the honest answer wasn't flattering. I was protecting a fear of being unimportant. Every overreaction was a small, loud attempt to prove otherwise to a room that most of the time hadn't even been questioning my importance in the first place. I was arguing with a ghost and calling it a principle. That's the cost this discipline actually asks of you. Not politeness, not suppression. An honest look at what you're really defending when you snap, and the humbling discovery, most of the time, that it was smaller and older than the thing that supposedly set you off. Every person who has ever mastered themselves in this particular way learned the same quiet fact, usually the hard way. Almost nothing anyone says to you is really about you. It's about them, their fear, their status anxiety, their own unresolved war with themselves, aimed outward because it's easier to point a weapon at someone else than to sit with it alone. Once you see that clearly, the sting doesn't vanish entirely. You're still human. The old wiring is still installed, but it stops being able to steer you. And underneath all of it sits the one fact that outlasts every argument you'll ever have. Your time is finite, and you will spend a portion of it every single day on whatever you decide is worth your attention. Spend it carelessly, and strangers will make those decisions for you, one provocation at a time, for the rest of your life. Spend it on purpose, and you become something most people only pretend to be, and almost no one actually is. A person who cannot be moved by anyone who hasn't earned the right to move you.